Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 3 of the Q&As. I'm getting so many questions right now, I'm going to go ahead and do 3 parts for a while, and it still doesn't let me get to anywhere near all the questions. There's just so many now that we can easily justify 3 parts. So let's go ahead and get to this question. Alright, first question, and this is a really long one. Jason, please, I'm looking for help. I've been very busy with work and travel, and I'm only able to sleep 7 hours a night because I work mainly sedentary. I don't eat as much as before. I'm in a rather conservative surplus. Total for the day is 2.7 to 3K calories. Ooh. I train 4 to 5 days a week, upper, lower, upper, lower. 5x5 progression on main lifts plus accessories. Sundays and Mondays are good because I get sleep during the weekend, but the week sessions have been feeling harder, mainly mentally harder. The weight just feels twice as heavy in my mind. I love training and go to the gym to train and progress, but my mind and my body just don't want to be there. Plus, because I'm not active, I'm not even motivated to eat. What bothers me is that in the last 2 weeks, I've had 2 nights where I can't get all my sleep. I'm feeling mega tired and want to sleep, but my body wakes up at freaking 5 a.m. and doesn't want to go to sleep, and consequently, the sessions on the following day feel even worse. I'm really trying to push it hard. My goals for the year are overhead press 2 plates, close grip bench press 3 plates, high bar squat 4 plates, conventional deadlift 500 plus with no belt. I'm within 10 to 15% of those. All right, brother, so you're talking about basically a 225 press, a 315 close grip, 400 high bar squat, and a 500 plus conventional deadlift. If you're within 10% on those lifts, you're pushing pretty heavy weight. Now you're training 5 days a week and you're only eating 2.7 to 3,000 calories. I'm gonna tell you right now, as a guy who is past those, you've seen me pass all of those. Some of them by not very much. I'm losing weight on your caloric intake. I'm losing 2 pounds a week on your caloric intake with 0 cardio, training only 3 days a week. All right, what does this tell you? Meaning I have a little bit more muscle than you do, probably not an enormous amount, and that's a fast cut for me to eat what you're eating. Now you're training 5 days a week, and you're not getting enough sleep. You don't think you're borderline overtraining at this point? I'm going to say that relative to your food intake and your sleep, that you are. And here's the thing: the weight's getting really, really heavy. Everything's getting hard. You're now starting to develop some mild insomnia. You do realize these are the signs of overreaching. So these are some of the signs. The inability to sleep even when you're tired, particularly the weight gets feeling heavier and heavier. You're not recovering anymore, right? Actual getting close to overtraining and chronic overreaching can actually cause insomnia. It can reduce the amount of sleep that you get. So what I'm going to say to you, brother, you need to go ahead and deload. You need to find a way to get that extra sleep in, and you probably need to bump your calories a little bit. Even if it's coming from protein or something else, your calories need to come up a little bit more. If you really and truly want to reach those goals, that's what you're going to have to do. That's the best advice I can give you. You're at that chronic overreaching state, and eventually that will become overtraining. You're there. Time to back down, and it's time for you to adjust to keep it from happening again. All right, next question. How seriously can we take studies on muscle growth? As basically anything works for a novice, studies are rarely done on advanced or intermediate lifters, most commonly on untrained or vague regular gym goers. That's an interesting question to ask. That's a really good question to ask, and I think the problem we run into is that we could argue that for all of us who are serious about this, we only care about intermediate and advanced plus lifters, right? That's what we care about because that's where all of us are, who are actually following this stuff, who care about the research and the studies and everything else. But 95% of people out there at any given time who are training, even training seriously, are novices though, aren't they? So in light of that, there aren't many people always for them to pull from for studies. And number 2, the majority of people who are needing to make gains are novices. I mean, let's be realistic here about this. And this is, I think, a point that the starting strength guys make, Ripto makes. Most of the information out there needs to be for novices. because realistically at any given time, novices are the people who need the most information. So again, is it really a bad thing that most of the data is for novices? And yes, everything works for a novice, but some things work a hell of a lot better. There are methods that work twice as fast or 3 times as fast for novices, right? Right? Even though everything does work for them. As far as the other studies go, well, you're right. We can't always take all that seriously, and there's a lot of bias and bullshit in this study. So what you need to do is look at the studies on more advanced lifters. And that's what I particularly enjoy looking at, is when they take studies and they take a set of criteria and test it in novices, and it gets a certain result, then they go try it on some intermediates. And then maybe they try it on college scholarship athletes and stuff like that. So when we rotate through these different groups and see when we get results, I think that's the interesting ones. And for me, what I find most interesting is that when that's done, it produces some stuff that's contrary to what a lot of even the evidence-based people out there believe, doesn't it? See, because most of what they believe oftentimes comes from the novice studies only, doesn't it? So here's what I would say. Don't ignore it, but you need to take some of it with a grain of salt. Put all of it in context. I believe you posted earlier that you coach people and train people. Take your observations of the people that you coach and train, take your own experiences in the real world, and use that to sometimes look at all the studies and put them in context and see if everything jives. Because at the end of the day, yeah, coaching people and training people isn't always a laboratory. It's not always a laboratory, is it? It's a totally different animal. But I don't think we should disregard these studies. I don't think we ever should. But there are times where you have to take your own experience and actually working with people and yourself and everything else and put some of these studies into context. And a perfect one is that if a study only looks at novice lifters, put it in that context. Understand that you maybe can't extrapolate that study outside of the demographic that it looked at. You know, that maybe you can, but it's not always wise to do so if your personal coaching experience is contrary to that with people outside of that demographic. So you have to season this stuff with a little bit of wisdom and experience. All right, next question. When you say that drug-free people can go to worlds in powerlifting, even in non-drug-tested competitions, do you mean they can compete and do well? Because that sounds unrealistic, given if they competed in the 181 and 198 weight classes, they would be competing against the Dan Greens and Larry Wheels in their weight classes. Well, no, they wouldn't. They wouldn't be competing against the Larry Wheels of their weight class. Didn't Larry Wheels admit he started juicing in his teens? Do you understand that the Larry Wheels of the world are where they are because they're genetically gifted and they used a ton of drugs their entire lifting career? You have to put that in context. I mean, let's be realistic here. People say silly stuff like, well, if this guy had never done drugs, he would still be the best. Are you sure about that? You're telling me that there's not a shift in epigenetics and everything else for someone who starts using gear when they're 16 or 17? You don't think that affects their results compared to other people who maybe had similar potential? Do you think that automatically means that they had the most potential? That's not always the case. People respond to drugs differently, and people who start them at a younger age, their bodies experience certain things differently, for better or for worse, and that's definitely not a good thing in all cases. And realistically, no, they're not competing against those same sort of guys in their weight class. They're competing against guys who have the amount of muscle that their frame will allow for. All right? And you need to understand that. And a lot of them tend to be in lighter weight classes. I'm not telling you that these are guys competing in the 240 or 275. Like, for example, you start looking at the lighter weight classes, that matters. Like, one of my friends competes in the 140s. Lifetime drug-free, personal friend of mine. And I know him personally, and he goes through stricter drug testing at his job than they actually do test for steroids in his profession. He is actually tested for steroids at his job. All right, random tested. I've seen him go to Worlds. You're talking about a guy who in the 140s deadlifts over 500 pounds. Talking about a guy in the 140s, I've seen him bench 275 for a double in training with me spotting him while walking around at 145 pounds. Let's be realistic here. Guys competing in the 198 who are natural better not be too tall. I mean, so again, what you're talking about, they're not going to be competing in those classes. If you're competing in the 198 as a natural, lifetime natural, well, you're going to probably need to be, you know, realistically 5'11", 6 foot, 6'1" to do well. So there's a height factor there. Well, the thing is, stay inside your class. Stay inside the appropriate weight class for you. If you bulk up to 25% body fat or 30% body fat to be in the 198 as a natural, who's 5'6" or 5'7", expect to get your ass handed to you. If you're 5'7" and a natural, you probably need to be 160 pounds. If you want to be competitive, compete at 160, 165. Don't try to compete at the 198. And that's the difference. The guys who are drug-free who want to do well at Worlds have to be very, very mindful of their weight class and their body composition. But no, they're not competing against the Dan Greens and the Larry Wheels, because those are guys who are carrying 50 pounds more muscle than their frame would ever allow for. Totally different animal. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.